Hello, I'm Josh Baer, and welcome to the Baer Facts podcast. In this episode, we visited the Miami home of Adam Sender, one of the most prominent collectors in the game today and in the past. As one of the first hedge fund managers to get serious about collecting art, starting in 1998, his collection held about 1,000 pieces at its height. With Art Basel Miami Beach and Miami Art Week well underway at the time of this recording, we knew Adam would be the perfect guest to talk with. So tune in to hear Adam's opinions and insights as we look back at his past, his present, and his future of art collecting. This is part one of a special two-part episode of the Baer Facts podcast. Look out for part two in January 2025. And happy holidays. This episode is brought to you by Arthur Analytics, your single pane of glass for following the art world. Now, anyone following last month's auctions in New York, and I think I was at a few of them, knows that cutting through the noise is half the battle, or even more. Arthur Analytics is a digital Swiss Army knife for art collecting. It combines powerful tools and data with an easy-to-use interface. It enables you to see past the hype and the headlines, but we love hype and headlines, but also to find the art you really want. They've provided our listeners with a free trial, no commitment required, at arthuranalytics.com/BaerFacts. Check it out after this episode. So, Baer Facts podcast, we're here with Adam Sender, kind of like, in my mind, Adam Sender 2.0 or 3.0, 4.0. Which would you describe yourself as your status as art collector?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about life, I'm probably on 3.0. If we're talking about, art collector, I'm kind of in a pause moment right now in terms of art collecting. I think the way that I collected for so long and so intensely, when you do it like that, it's really hard to now just dabble in it and not be fully in it.
So let's give a little bit of the background. When we first met, it's got to be over 20 years ago, to my mind. And I'm going to get back to this notion of hedge fund, art collector. But in my mind, you had the best art collection of anybody in that realm. This is looking through your website, which pieces and all that. One of the top 5 or 10 art collectors pretty much in the world. Maybe 2000, 2005?
I would say that if I was able to keep my collection together, I would probably have the best, if not one of the best collections in the world right now. But, not the trophy pieces, not the pieces that are going for, $100 million, but in terms of depth and in terms of having different artists in size. At one point, I think we had 15 Richard Princes, all different kinds of examples of this work.
How did you get from zero to that point?
I think I was walking on West Broadway in Soho, probably 1998 or something.
You were 28 or something? How old were you?
I was in my 20s.
In the 20s.
And I went into this gallery on West Broadway, one of those really cheesy galleries. And there was this Peter Max Statue of Liberty piece. And the sales lady was hot and she was really, really aggressive. And I came really close to buying this piece, but I had this instinct that this was not the right thing to do. And this was going to be a complete ripoff. So I was friendly at the time with Sandy Heller. I grew up in the Five Towns on Long Island. Sandy also grew up in the Five Towns. I was good friends with his brother as well, his twin brother, who actually worked for me for a long time. My earliest memory of Sandy is actually these guys lived right next door to the first love of my life. And I was a senior in high school. I was up in the room hanging out with her, and these guys they would shake my car and make the car alarm go off. So I would have to go downstairs and start yelling at them. So, but I went to Sandy's house and I saw he had these roof heads, and I was what is this? And he's like, oh, this is, contemporary art. I'm like, are you serious? Did you really buy this? Do you really like hanging this in your house? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
Was he still like in his family's schmata business at that point, or had he gone off?
I think he just started collecting.
Yeah. By the way, he went to Florence. I think he worked in conservation. A lot of people know Sandy as this big art advisor, but actually he learned restoration in Italy. Did you know that?
I think I did know that.
Yeah.
So I tried to have an open mind, and, one thing led to another, and Sandy introduced me to Todd Levin. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. Probably I worked at SAC. I left SAC.
Yeah. So to explain your relationship to SAC, meaning Steve Cohen and Sandy working for Steve Cohen. What's the chronology of that? Who knew Steve first, Sandy or you?
I did. So I grew up in Long Island, very middle class family. My dad owned a plumbing supply in Brooklyn that was in the family for like 60, 70 years. And I graduated in Michigan in 91, but I had started watching the market in the late 80s, 89.
The art market or the stock market?
And basically, my dad really wanted me to work for him. I worked for him for 6 months, but I already was starting to make more money trading than working for my dad. He basically gave me an ultimatum, and I was like, see you later, Dad. It was pretty clear that he was going to get destroyed from Home Depot. So I started a hedge fund in the early 90s. Guy knocked on my door, a recruiter for Steve. I met Steve probably in maybe 95 or so. And I went to work for Steve at SAC.
Was he collecting art by that point?
No,
No.
not at all. And fun fact, he was actually a big Yankee fan, not a Met fan.
Well, the Yankees won't like him too much if he signs Juan Soto.
So basically, I worked for Steve, and that really was, the golden age of analog trading. What I mean by that is people trading against people, using your instincts, calling down to the floor of the stock exchange, having a broker on the mercantile exchange to trade futures. It was a completely different time than it is today. Today, trading in the market is like working in an alien casino, basically.
But let me just ask you a question within that, and it'll all come back to the art. But we use the word hedge fund all the time. It's a generic for everything, right?
What's a hedge fund?
Or am I wrong that people just use it for anybody doing anything almost?
Yeah, I think that's a little wrong. A hedge fund is a pool of assets. You're managing outside people's money. And traditionally, those hedge funds in the 90s, like the Soroses of the world and SAC, they were supposed to have very outsized returns. Today, it's a little bit different with like the Ken Griffins and the pod shops.
But I always thought, well, if it goes up, we win this way. But if it goes down, we have this alternate way of winning too. So that you were winning basically in both sides of some sort of industry or financial movement. Is that a bad definition for an art advisor?
What I always tried to do was make money if the market was going up or make money if the market was going down. But the 90s were really like the beginning of the internet, the biggest blow off that, that I have seen in my lifetime. And, maybe we're going to see another one now with AI, but it was an incredible time. I was at the right place at the right time and frankly made a fortune from 1999 to 2000 and change. So that's why,
That's why we're able to collect the art. Going back a little bit further, I'm always curious at your dad's house, your mom's house, plumbing, supply, there was art on the wall, wasn't there? Every house has art on the wall.
It's funny. There was a Magritte photograph, and I actually have it in my house in the Hamptons because I always loved it. There was art on the wall, but certainly there wasn't an appreciation of art really or contemporary art. I mean, there were a couple, like my mom always told me that before she married my dad, she dated this guy who lived in the back of Lawrence, and he was one of the early collectors of Warhol. I forgot the guy's name. And then I actually had another girlfriend who I went to her house, and they also had a pretty decent art collection.
Were you taking the train in the city with your mom or whatever, go to the
Never.
to the Met,
Never.
or because there's nothing in the five towns.
No.
So you'd have to like
Never.
get on the Long Island Railroad.
Never.
And
No appreciation, no care, like just nothing.
And within 5 years of this point we're talking about, you've got 1,000 works of art, right?
We're talking 25 years ago. So, but yes, I think at the peak about 11 to 1,200 pieces of art.
So that's buying what, a work a day almost?
I could only find the data going back to 2000, but on the low end, I was spending 250 to 300,000 a month. And on the high end, I found a couple months where I spent 3 million. But I would say the average looks like it was probably like around $600,000, a month.
But that's by dollar, but by volume, how many works of art?
Like I said, like 1,100 pieces.
I often say that people spend more time researching buying a refrigerator than they do a work of art.
Yep.
I mean, obviously your business is research oriented. How much time could you actually do, even with proper advisor at the time?
What I liked about it was that there was kind of a yin yang kind of aspect to it, because the trading at the time was very labor intensive, and the art, I was able to show my creative side. And
so some people play golf, you bought art,
yeah,
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it was fun?
It was fun. Yeah. Looking back on it, I have a lot of great memories. Sometimes it's a little painful in terms of the fact that I wish I was able to keep the collection together, but life happens.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode of the Barefaxed podcast, where Adam Sender reflects on the height of his power as an art collector, the relationships that helped him get there, and how his life and collection began to change over time. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this message.
Arthur Analytics is the only platform you need to master the art of collecting. And I need to master the art of collecting too. So let's say you're down here in Miami, like I am, and you think you've just discovered the next big artist. By the way, if you have, don't forget to call me. But still using Arthur's advanced search functionality, you can see for yourself with the artist's latest news, reviews by critics, sales, data trends, plus with interactive maps, which cover over 500 cities around the world, you can find out who's showing them and where. So Arthur takes the guesswork out of art collecting. For more information, head to arthuranalytics.com/Barefax. What would you wish your older self now could have told your younger self then?
It's a good question.
Thank you. I do this for a living sometimes.
It's not a question of like what my older self could tell my younger self. It's growing up. It's getting wise. It's going through hard times. It's finding yourself. It's learning how to be comfortable in your own skin. When I was making more money than anyone could ever possibly need or want, I was never happy. It was never enough. And, that's possibly why instead of being like a normal person and buying 20 pieces of art, 50 pieces of art, I bought 1,100 pieces of art. The same way that in the Hamptons, I bought this house that had 13 acres. And then I just wanted to buy all the property around me and ended up with 50 acres and had like this manifest destiny type of attitude.
But is it that much different than walking down Broadway on a Saturday and seeing people going in and buying their 60th sweater or their 100th pair of shoes? I guess the term is retail therapy. So there's a certain amount of art collecting is that just on a different scale that's supposedly more pure and important.
Yes. I wear the same clothes basically every single day. So certainly I don't do retail therapy, but yeah, it was something that kind of kept on growing and became exciting. And
it was fun, right?
Yeah, going to Basel and Switzerland was fun, and going to art dinners and getting first pick in these shows was incredible. And like you said, at the time, 2001, 2000, 2002, we were spending so much money, getting so much attention.
You must have been a popular guy.
Yes, when you're spending money at a gallery, you are a very popular person. And if you stop spending money, then you're a little less popular.
So let's get to the end of the first phase. So when gross things change, what happened?
Life happened. I pretty much walked on water from 1991 to 2003. And I left Steve in 1998, started my own hedge fund, and basically crushed it up until 2003. 2004, I had my first down year, and you were only as good as your last year. And then I had a lot of assets go out the door because I picked the wrong people to work with. But, it was relatively fine. Like, it was doable. I looked into things, and there was a period where the numbers came down and I was spending like 100,000, 200,000 a month instead of like 600-700 a month. But it was fine. I got through that one down year. But in 2006, me and a group of hedge funds, SAC, Third Point, and probably like 3 or 4 other hedge funds got sued by a Canadian company in a RICO lawsuit for $7 billion.
That sounds like fun.
Well, I can tell you that 18 years later, it's still going on.
Wow.
And, I've spent over $25 million defending myself. I've gone to 2 trials, and I have been personally exonerated. However, my company, my assets, and, in a hedge fund, your assets under management are, the more assets you have, the more money you can make theoretically. And my assets under management plunged after that lawsuit and went from, somewhere at its peak, I had about $1.3 billion. And then after the lawsuit in 2007, I think I had about 50 million.
Now, is it true that, again, this is the part of me that's interested in business? I've often thought one of the things that art has really been good for people in the financial industries, particularly ones that take other people's money as well as their own, is your investors don't want you like investing in other stuff. They want you to be with them, right?
Right.
So they don't want you to be like, oh, I'm buying T-bills, but I'm selling you shares of Enron, right? But there's a carve out that's like, but you can take money out for like personal stuff. So personal stuff could be like a new refrigerator, or it could be a $40 million Basquiat, right?
Yep.
And it's actually the more expensive, the better, because it allows you to diversify and still stay within the letter of your hedge fund. Am I missing something here?
Well, I think, like you said, the more money you have personally in the hedge fund, the better it is for the investors because, everybody has skin in the game. But, I kept all my cash in my hedge fund.
That was considered okay because that was like a couch, right?
Nobody,
in a certain way.
I mean, no, as long as the performance is good.
They don't care.
They don't care. There's probably a little cachet about collecting, especially today, the people who are collecting or.
But some of my friends who are bankers, it's like, you're spending a lot of time on art collecting. Why aren't you spending more time like managing my money?
Well, I mean, I get up at 4:00 in the morning. I'm busting my ass every single day. I know how hard I'm working. So, my investors, like,
okay, so let's get back to
they're not busting my chops.
Let's get back to the art collection. So what year was it that this controversial sale? So you needed money at a certain point to either put in your business or you chose or the personal things.
That wasn't the kiss of death. The assets under management tanking was tough. Then Todd and I broke up essentially in 2008. We had been together for probably 10 years and, I haven't spoken to Todd since, 2008. So how many years is that? 16 years. And look, there is no way that I would have been able to do what I did and be comfortable without having somebody like Todd, who was extremely knowledgeable about the art market. And
that's always an interesting dynamic about, is it the advisor who gets the credit? Is it the collector gets the credit? As an advisor myself, Ideally, there's a collaboration there where you're on the same page, available to work something. And from the outside, people, it's not always clear.
It's similar to being in a hedge fund where I'm the portfolio manager and I have an analyst. So, I'm the one who's actually pulling the trigger and paying the bills. And so at the end of the day, it's my collection. But that being said, like you said, if I'm sitting at a desk all day long and trading and he is going out and doing the vetting and talking to everybody, you need those type of people working for you, especially to collect on that level.
Well, in my personal experience going back then was like, I had these Chris Burdens and I showed them to Todd and then he went to you.
Yep.
And my feeling was you were pulling the trigger.
Yep.
But it wasn't like in a vacuum.
No, I mean, listen, we would go through catalog raisonnés. We would try, I'm not just buying something because somebody's telling me to buy something. First of all, I have to like it. And it has to make sense to me in terms of like understand.
Did you have like a matrix or a decision tree of like, okay, how does it fit into history? Or how does it look visually? Or how is it in the market? Did you have like a methodology that you could identify?
We never it wasn't like a decorator type of situation where people buy.
I'm not saying that.
But, certainly there were pieces that we would want. And the only way to fill them in was to buy them at auction. So yes, there was certainly, things that we were targeting, things we were looking for. And especially when we were buying in depth the way that we were, there was always going to be pieces that we were hunting for.
So let's get to the art controversies there. So what year was it? 2008, you have this breakup, and that led to a bit of a breakup of the big part of the collection. That took a while to happen. Right?
Well, ironically, we talked about what a hedge fund does. And, so I got sued in 2006, all the money left. But 2007 was the first year of the recession. And ironically, I made 50% that year and crushed it. And then in 2008, when the market got completely crushed, I also made money that year too. I mean, I have a great track record as an investor, as a trader. But, I pivoted and I've had to pivot because what I did in the 90s is not doable anymore. The human on human, the instinct trading, the tape reading is dead.
So, I read that Cohen, the greatest trader of all time, is right 54% of the time. Yeah. We think, it's got to be 95%, but he's the greatest, right? That's 46% mistakes.
Yeah, true. And that being said, he was a lot smarter than me and was able to pivot and change his business and adapt. And it took me a very long time to get where I am now, to where I feel like I'm adapting and I'm, finally really coming into my own again.
So 2014, I remember, to my mind, the Sender collection, you'd go online. I don't know if it was password protected, the collection.
I think it was.
I think I had the password. I could go look and you'd go there. And I'm not just like, blowing smoke up your ass. I go, oh, Baldessari. It's like, that's the best Baldessari. Yep. Or there'd be whatever artist you go, that's not just the name. It's like, he's got the best one. Yep. And I thought, how do you do that? And I was sort of mistaken. I thought, well, he only owned these 100 things, not 1,000 things. And I thought, well, he has less money than the other guys. So that makes his decisions more important. But in fact, you had more art than I realized back then.
But, 1,100 pieces, that doesn't mean that every piece is worth, some pieces are worth $20,000.
But they could be great works of art.
Of course.
This concludes part 1 of our conversation with Adam Sender. Look out for part 2 wherever you get your podcasts in 2025. Again, thanks to Adam Sender for welcoming us into his home for this episode. And thank you, Arthur Analytics, for sponsoring this episode of the Bearfax Podcast. Their app is available on the web or on your mobile device. No, you can't get it with smoke signals. Use those too. It features the data and insights that keep the art world moving in one easy-to-use application. So Arthur Analytics is changing the game for art collectors like you around the world. You can try it out for yourself free, no commitment required at arthuranalytics.com/bearfacts.
Thanks for listening to the Bear Facts podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Josh Baer. Our executive producer is Luyang Zhang. Our content strategist is Boliang Shen. And I'm Patrick Hill, associate editor. Our audio editor for this episode is Auntie Lane. Check back soon for future episodes as we unpack the inner workings of the global art industry through exclusive, candid interviews with key players in the business, as they offer their perspectives on art and the market in the US, Asia, Europe, and beyond.